Welcome to Emotional Dinosaur, the mental health podcast where we discuss how to grow up or grow extinct when it comes to viewing and treating mental health in the 21st century. Greetings and salutations, my fellow dinosaurs. This is your host, Toinette Pinkerton. I know it's been quite some time since we did our introductory podcast, and I apologize for the delay in bringing out a new podcast for you, but for full transparency and disclosure, I'm going to kind of tell you what's been going on. So after our initial podcast dropped, just to tell you guys what we're doing and what we're about, I had went out of the country for a bit, and upon returning, my depression got really bad. So much so that I had to seek some intensive treatment, which ended up in hospitalization for a week. My depression had gotten so bad that I was pretty much in despair and hopeless. I started having some passive suicidal ideation. And for those of you that are not aware of what exactly that is, it's just that I wanted to cease to exist. I didn't want to be in this world anymore. And I find that very sad for anyone. And I'm trying to feel sometimes sad for myself. That's very hard for me because I'm not an extremely compassionate person when it comes to myself. Others, oh yes, but myself, not so much, which is part of my problem sometimes. However, that ideation evolved from being passive and just wanting to cease to exist to active and thinking about hurting myself. It is at that time I knew I needed to get some more intensive treatment and some assistance so that nothing happened, because ultimately, even though I felt like I wanted to cease to exist and not be here anymore, I really did not want to die. So I reached out and explained to my husband how I was feeling and what was going on. I know he loves me so much, and I am so appreciative of that. So in that sense, when I tell him these things, it really hurts him because he doesn't want to see me in so much pain. But we went to my physician, my psychiatrist, and explained what was going on. And that's when we decided that it was time to be hospitalized and get some medication adjustments and stability in that. So I was in the hospital for some time. And upon leaving that, I was in a partial hospitalization program. Let's explain what a partial hospitalization program is. It's essentially an all-day program that is outpatient, but you go to and they have different type of groups. So coping skills, challenging negative thought patterns, art therapy, music therapy, lots of different stuff like that. A lot of people might think that all of that stuff is hokey, but ultimately it is really not. It is really beneficial. I can tell you in the weeks that I participated in that program, I came to a lot of realization for myself. It was really helpful in challenging negative thought patterns and working on mindfulness, which helps you stay grounded in the moment. Depression keeps you grounded in the past. Anxiety, which I also have, keeps you grounded in the future. So think about that. If one's in the past and one's in the future, ultimately, if you suffer from both, you're kind of in chaos a lot, which is very emotionally and mentally exhausting. Learning some new skills, some of which, oddly enough, being in the mental health field myself, I used to teach years and years ago, but even learning self-compassion or practicing self-compassion, or trying to practice self-compassion, I should say rather. I've never been one really good at that. But when you don't practice self-compassion, or at least when I don't practice self-compassion, I go down this negative trail that becomes a snowball rolling down a hill. And the snowball obviously picks up speed and size and just becomes this insurmountable thing. I've realized I really need to focus on those things, as well as coping skills and being in the moment, being in this moment with you right now, this moment speaking to you. I need to be here and not let my mind wander to the future, to the past. We miss out on so many things when that happens. And so I've really been practicing, how do you be mindful? There's lots of different ways, and in future episodes, we will definitely go over those, but some of them, you can be mindful taking a shower, just focusing on the scent of your soap, or the feel of the lather, or the feel of the water, and just being in that moment and focusing on that. You could be mindful in prayer. I know that when I was in the hospital, the first couple of days were very stressful for me, and I spent a lot of my time focusing on my breathing and on the Lord's Prayer. That helped me stay in the moment, and it was a meditation and a mindfulness that helped calm my anxiety. So upon graduation from partial hosp, I entered into intensive outpatient. An intensive outpatient is not all day. It's actually just an afternoon or a morning where you go and you attend groups, and it's more intensive processing of skill building and development, kind of going over, symptomatology, how you handle it, more of talking about mindfulness. All this stuff is in a group setting, and interestingly enough, I talked to my husband about the group setting just the other day. He is not a proponent of it and felt that he didn't understand the helpfulness behind it. So what I explained to him is that in a group setting, you come to realize you're not alone. Part of mental illness makes you feel like you're alone, alienated, and like no one understands or would understand. But being in a group setting, you realize that there's so many other people that struggle with what you struggle. Maybe not the exact situations, maybe not the exact feelings, but it's validating, and it makes you feel a sense of community and a sense of, again, just not being alone. Additionally, in a group setting, it allows you to hear other people's perspectives. I know for myself, like if I can get lost in my own thought, it's not very helpful sometimes. So hearing other people and how they process things, and maybe something that they use to help with coping skills or to handle certain situations is something that I've never thought of or been exposed to. And so those things can be helpful, as well as my own experiences. They do help other people as well. So those are the big key things, as well as the fact that, just in a group setting, it's so much easier for professionals to get out a lot of information to a lot of people. After the intensive outpatient was completed, which was just about a week ago, I started TMS, and TMS is transmagnetic stimulation. It is for treatment-resistant depression and has shown positive signs in helping diminish some symptoms of depression. I am definitely looking for positive outcomes and am hopeful that this will help diminish some of the chronic symptoms of depression that I've been suffering with over, a lifetime. So that's where we've been. After the TMS is completed, I am excited to be able to be involved in a trauma program. During this whole time, I ended up diagnosed with PTSD as well, and I never thought that is something I suffered with, but groups, the partial hosp and the intensive outpatient program, they also helped kind of enlighten individuals on symptomatology. So even though I've worked in the field for over 20 years, I guess I didn't fully understand PTSD and how it affects the brain and the body and what the symptoms were. And so once I was fully educated on that, I was actually kind of shocked to see that that's what I suffered with. So I'm excited to be able to get involved in a trauma-focused program so that I can get beyond some of those issues that have been holding me back as well. Another thing that I did during this time that I would just love to encourage people to do, especially if you suffer from debilitating guilt and shame. I was given this book in my partial hospital program from one of my therapists that is just transformative in my opinion, entitled Guilt and Shame, Masters of Disguise, and the author is Jane Middleton Mose, M-O-Z. It is so enlightening going over situations, especially traumatic situations that children grow up in, and cause them to shape how they think about themselves and the world and how they interact with themselves and the world, and how it is focused on shame and guilt. It really described to me a lot of the reasoning behind some of my own behaviors, and I was just in awe, again, that I'm not alone, and that the things I had went through were validated. Not that maladaptive coping skills are good and not that they should be promoted in any way, shape, or form, but it gave me words to express things that I hadn't been able to put in words in a long time. It also gave me a mechanism to share with my husband. It's kind of explaining where my thought process is, why it's that way. Not that I'm not going to challenge it, because I'm definitely going to use this book at this point, once I get back to my individual therapy, to kind of process through a lot of these things, these cognitive errors that I have, to challenge them and reframe thinking and learn a different way. That's all life is, right? Life is growth. Life, hopefully, is growth. So if anybody has ever suffered with shame or guilt, I really, truly encourage you to check out this book. It is a very brief read. It's very concise. It's very informative. Anybody who's experienced trauma in their childhood really should utilize this as a platform to kind of look at themselves and allow for some personal growth and healing, because healing is so very important. And I think that's what I'm coming to see over this past new year, that this is what I've really been focusing on for myself, is healing. It's a long time coming. I am in my 40s and often feel like I'm 5, just because of the stunted progression I had because of trauma in my childhood. So I am working on that so that I can be a better mother to my adult son, a better wife to my husband, a better friend to my friends, and just a better person for myself, because that is so very important. Today, Lindsay is going to interview my husband, Alan, and they're going to discuss how my recent decompensation with my depression and hospitalization has affected them, and what type of things people can do in such situations. Please keep in mind that this is a candid discussion between two non-clinicians. Everything stated is based on their perceptions, and nothing is meant offensively. But first, here's a dino fact.
Hey guys, it's Lindsay and I'm here to bring you some dinosaur facts. Today I decided to bring up a movie series that I used to watch all the time. One of my favorites, in fact, and it was The Land Before Time. So I decided to go over some of the dinosaurs in that series itself. First, I'm going to start off with Littlefoot. If you are familiar with the series, you know Littlefoot, the Apatosaurus. The name of the Apatosaurus means deceptive lizard. It is a herbivore and was alive during the late Jurassic period. An average length for an Apatosaurus was 21 to 22.8 meters, also known as 69 to 75 feet. It is a very long dinosaur. Next would be the Triceratops, which was Sarah. The Triceratops name is meaning three-horned face, and it was a herbivore as well. The Triceratops, though, was actually alive during the late Cretaceous period, unlike the Apatosaurus, and its average length was 8 to 9 meters, also 26 to 30 feet. Next, I'm going to be talking about Ducky. Ducky was a Saurolophosaurus, which means lizard crest. They were also herbivores, and they were alive during the late Cretaceous period. The average length for a Saurolophosaurus was 9 to 12 meters, which is also 30 to 40 feet. Ducky's brother in the franchise was Spike, the Stegosaurus. His dinosaur name meaning is Stego means roof and Saurus means lizard. Stegosaurus was a herbivore during the late Jurassic period, so it was actually alive during the Apatosaurus's life. And the average length of a Stegosaurus was 9 meters or 30 feet. Now, the last quote-unquote dinosaur in that franchise was Petrie, who is actually not a dinosaur at all. He is actually a pterosaur, which pterosaurs are a whole other group of animals. So Petrie was a pterodon, which the name meaning for a pterodon, pteron means wing, and anodon means toothless. A pterodon would have been a pescivore, which is a fish eater, just like the previous Spinosaurus that I had mentioned previous. Pterodons also lived during the late Cretaceous period, so during the same time as the Triceratops and the Sahelanthropus. Average wingspan of one of these would be 7 meters, or also known as 23 feet. So, like I said before, the Apatosaurus and the Stegosaurus actually would have been during the same period of time during the late Jurassic, but actually the Triceratops, the Pterodon, and the Sahelanthropus would all have been during the late Cretaceous. And that is all I have for you today. Have a fantastic day. Bye. Okay, so recently Antoinette was in the hospital for mental illness, and we're going to talk about that today with my Uncle Alan.
Hello.
So, how does Antoinette's depression affect you?
Well, it affects me quite deeply, actually. When she gets depressed or it really flares up, I really get anxious about it. And I get unhappy and stressed myself because my natural reaction is I love this person with all my heart and I don't want her to be unhappy or feel bad. So the first thing I want to do is fix it, which is impossible in a situation like this with her depression, because depression isn't not something you can fix. It's just something that you can treat and learn to cope with, which it's taken me quite a long time to learn. But, and when she gets like that, I worry about her. So in this particular past episode, it was really difficult. It was really difficult. In the past, it's also been really difficult, but I've also made the situation worse because I didn't learn about the illness. In fact, I didn't even want to accept the fact that she really had an actual mental illness because she seemed so put together and, really with it, way more with it than I am. So yes, it affects me very profoundly.
I kind of agree with you in that kind of area too, where I know when she went to the hospital and everything and you guys told me she was in the hospital, I understood that she did have problems with mental illness. I knew that we have that in common, but for some reason it was hard to think that she would ever be in real danger and stuff like that, because I've always thought of her as being really, really strong. But that's the other thing, is thinking that makes her not strong when that's not the case. Her going to the hospital itself makes her even stronger because she was willing to see that there was a problem that she needed help with.
That's a very good point, Lindsay. A lot of people think that going to see a therapist or seeking treatment or doing anything like that is showing weakness, when in fact it's exactly the opposite. It takes a very strong person to admit that they need help and want and willfully act upon trying to get themselves better or in treatment.
I could not agree more. So, what were you thinking when Antoinette was in the crisis moment and everything and was thinking about self-harm?
Yeah, so, I was dismayed, to say the least. It had been quite a while since I was aware that it last happened to her. I was quite sad to realize how much she had been suffering lately. But this time I was also determined that I would do the very best that I could, better than I had in the past, to help her help herself. And she was really freaking out, and I was trying to remain as calm as possible, but she was very agitated and telling me that she really just wanted to stab herself in the eyeballs with a fork to stop her brain and stop the pain. It was quite difficult to remain calm through it all, however, she was actually self-aware, even behind it all, that she needed to do something about it. She knows that she didn't want to act on those feelings and thoughts and didn't want to put me through that either. So she was willing to tell the partial hospitalization team the next morning exactly what she had been thinking and feeling, and she knew that would mean that she would get admitted. But as you said in what we were just talking about earlier, it takes a strong person to do that, and that is what she did.
Yeah, I know that when you texted me and told me that she was currently going to be admitted, I know I was thinking about how I originally was afraid and worried, but then I thought more and I thought about how she was getting help, how this means that she was going to be safe, that if she was actually doing this, if she was in the hospital, then there is more of a chance than if she were to not go to the hospital, that she was actually safe, and that obviously people go to the hospital and go to places like that to get better, and that's what she was going to do, was going to get better. And I just kept thinking about that and trying to remind you too that it was going to be better, that it wasn't going to just stay like that. So, Uncle Alan, what did you do to help Antoinette when you found out? And why did you choose to take that form of action?
Well, what I said just a few minutes ago was the biggest thing that I learned to do was remain calm. Remain calm, because I have a tendency to not only sympathize with her feelings, but start to empathize. And if she starts freaking out or is in a bad mood or whatever, then it doesn't matter how much of a good mood I was in previously. All of a sudden, I get in a bad mood because she's in a bad mood, or if she's sad, I start getting sad. So if she starts freaking out, I usually start freaking out. And this time, I told myself that's not going to help the situation. I have to remain calm. I know what I need to do, and I need to listen to her and then tell her exactly what she needed to do the following day, which she already knew, thankfully, but I had to reassure her that it was the right thing to do. And on top of that, I decided to take the next day off of work and accompany her to the hospital, where I pretty much spent the whole day with her, because that is what happened. She did get admitted, and I was able to be with her as much as I possibly could, as much as they would let me, for the rest of the day.
So, Uncle Alan, what would you have done, though, if she refused treatment? If she either told you what she was actually thinking about the self-harm and everything, or if you could tell that there was something very wrong and she did not want to get help?
That is a very good question. The first thing that I would do would be to call 911. But after that, that's a good question, because if she wasn't willing to do it, I know myself, and I would probably try to attempt to reason with her, but at that point, I also know that that would probably be futile. I would attempt to make her as calm as possible until the 911 responders showed up. I am fortunate in the fact that she has always seemed to recognize that even though she's behaving in that way, that she's still self-aware enough to know that she needs to do something about it. But if she wasn't, I don't know.
See, I actually have had to call the 911 dispatcher on a friend of mine before, one of my best friends, when they were having problems with suicidal thoughts, and luckily for me, she eventually complied once the dispatcher was there. But of course, at first she was afraid when I told her that I was going to call, and unfortunately, I was so worried that I had to call. But at times like that, you have to think that even if the person is going to be mad at you or stuff like that, I'd rather my friend be not talking to me because she's mad at me rather than not talking to me because she's no longer here at all.
Yes, that's a good point. I would much rather call 911 and have Toinette be furious at me but safe than not call and have something bad happen.
So Uncle Alan, what did you do to help with your stress levels? Because you did say that you tried your best to keep calm and everything during the situation. What kind of stuff did you do during the time that not only before she finally got admitted, but during when she was admitted to kind of help you stay calm?
Well, while it was happening, I remained calm mostly by telling myself that I was going to not repeat my mistakes of the past. So the only way to do that would be to remain calm and deal with the situation as calmly and rationally as possible. After she was admitted, of course, I really had trouble focusing on work when I was at work, and I had trouble, thinking about anything else. So I distracted myself by inviting my friend over almost every single night to play board games, which is one of my hobby passions. But of course, the minute that it was over, then all I could think about was Toinette again. So I looked forward to the hour that I would see her every day, that I was allowed during visiting hours, and what we would talk about and what she did during her day, and really looking forward to that. I have, like I said, in the past few years, unfortunately before that, I really did not do any research on depression or mental illness, but recently, in the past few years I have, so I try to read as much about that as possible and stay current. And essentially helping my stress levels, I either distracted myself with other things that I really love or thought about our time together we would have in the evening.
See, for me, I know that even though I knew that she was going to get better, I was a little bit anxious and stressed about how long would it take, is she really safe, all that stuff. But I think the main thing that kept me, I guess, kind of calm throughout the whole thing is just kept reminding myself, that obviously that she is safe, in a safe place, and that she was going to get better, and just kind of reinforcing that, telling myself that over and over again, she was going to get better, that she's safe, that she's going to get better, and we're going to get through this, and that everything in the end was going to be okay. So what kind of stuff helped you understand or handle Antoinette's depression? What kind of stuff kind of put you into a place that made it to where you could actually grasp what was happening, I guess?
Well, and I've mentioned this before a few times. First and foremost, research. Well, actually, I should go back a step and say, first and foremost, accepting the fact that she really had a mental illness and really had depression. And then after that, research, which is something she always stressed that I should do, but I just never got around to it. And I started researching this particular subject and spouses of people who have depression and how they cope with it. And that, I cannot stress enough how much researching this stuff and learning how to deal with this stuff and possibly going to therapy yourself can help you understand and handle loving someone with depression.
I actually would like to go back to something that you said before. You mentioned that it was really hard for you to kind of recognize or understand or really believe that she had a mental illness. And I think that's something, too, that a lot of people, especially without mental illness, kind of don't realize, is that a lot of people with depression or anxiety and stuff like that get really good at becoming actors and kind of putting on this show of that they're okay, so that there is nobody thinking, that something is wrong, because especially in society, it's kind of looked upon as a weakness, unfortunately, instead of just something to work on or make better. And I think that, I guess, one thing, believing when somebody says something like that, saying that they do have a mental illness or, something is wrong, and actually believing them instead of being like, no, you have your stuff together, that doesn't make any sense, is, I guess, a really helpful thing too, because, saying that you have a mental illness and then people kind of shrugging it off and being like, no, you get up in the morning, you go to work, you do all this extra stuff, there's no way, can also be really frustrating, because then it just kind of makes you feel a little bit less about the stuff. But I think that is a really good thing, that, really believing it and being like, yes, there is something wrong, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that we need to work on, just like anything else. So what do you think that we could all work together to do better on to help Antoinette's mental illness, or even my mental illness, or just others with mental illness in general?
I think we're all on the right path of doing better regarding everyone here's mental illness. I don't have a mental illness, but you and your aunt. Okay, you've been doing trauma therapy and been doing so much better. And when Toinette found her current therapist, she's made leaps and bounds doing better. And we all are more conscious of each other and what we're doing and how we affect each other. And I realize that I can't just fix it, so I just need to respect it. In regards to both of you, like sometimes I just get the feeling that depression is flaring up or whatever, and I don't bother you with silly banter or stupid jokes or well, I might do that to try to make you feel better, even though I know that it won't. But so I don't know what we could all do to be better other than continue what we're doing. We're all being more open about it and honest and talking about our feelings at least once a week when we get together. I think that's very helpful, and I think we're on the right path. I just think we need to stay the course.
I think that I kind of agree with that especially communicating the things that are happening and how everybody is feeling that day and stuff like that is really helpful, because especially when I may be having a depression flare up and Antoinette is having it at the same time, and then that, or anxiety flaring up at the second in time, and then someone else's, and it just kind of makes things worse when we don't talk about it and then instead just react on emotion, purely just emotion, and then it just ends up making everybody more, I think, upset. And one thing that I know my aunt has told me, and I think I really agree with, is you never really want to say something in an emotional state of mind where you will end up regretting it and kind of hurting each other, not meaning to, and then realizing later on that it was a huge mistake. I've noticed that, it's good when we communicate how we're feeling and then kind of give each other space if we're needing space. If we need to talk more, then we can talk it out more. If we need to do something completely different, then we can work on that too. And it's just really good to talk about it all.
Yes, that's good advice even for people without mental illness. That's just good advice for people that live together or are around each other a lot. But I think it's especially good advice for people living together where one or both or more have a mental illness or depression, because it can just carry that much more weight when you start saying things angrily in an emotional mind. So, yeah.
So what would you say to someone that has a loved one with mental illness? What would you say to kind of help them?
Be patient. If they're not in therapy, I would get them in therapy. I would get them to seek treatment as quickly as possible, and I would make sure that you're right there with them, not necessarily in their therapy sessions unless you're asked to be. Toinette goes to many therapy sessions, and I've only been to a few, but when she asks me to go, I know there's a reason, so I go. But be patient, try to remain calm, and when you learn what their diagnosis is, learn all that you can about it and how to cope with it and what the best reactions that you can have are in certain situations.
So for our final thing that I was going to ask, if someone else is out there and has a friend or themselves that is thinking about self-harm or anything like that, what would you recommend them do, especially if they have a friend and they don't feel that their friend is safe, basically?
Well, as I mentioned before, the first thing that you really should do is call 911, because as we talked a little bit ago, you'd rather be safe and have them be angry at you than have them do something that everyone will regret later.
So basically, just make sure that you call 911 to get them the help they need, and then also make sure that they're safe until they get there.
Yes, try to engage with them as much as possible until 911 gets there. Try to distract them or just really, really engage with them until help can arrive.
So, any closing remarks from you?
I just want to say that I'm very grateful for the opportunity to talk about this, and am very glad that Twinette is doing this. It's very important. People need to be aware. The stigma of mental illness needs to be eradicated. Everyone needs to be aware.
And the last thing I would just like to say is that I am very proud of Antoinette, not only for seeking the treatment that she did when she did, because she needed it, but also not, I guess, hiding it and making it, more public and everything like that, so that others can see what they should do, or, see that this is not something to really be ashamed of. It's just something that, someone needs help. You get your help that you need.
Yes, and I am very proud of her as well. I think it's quite brave. Put yourself out there like this, and in my opinion, she's doing it fearlessly. But it is great that she is doing that, and hopefully, it will help a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lindsay, for that awesome interview. We would like to thank Alan for his willingness to be interviewed and be part of this mental health awareness movement. We would also like to thank you, the listener, and challenge you to step out of your comfort zone and become educated about mental illness, if not already. When we stand together, we stand stronger. Grow up or grow extinct.